So do they fire you, or did you give those cowards a way out and walked away?
So they did not fire me. Sorry to disappoint you.
Ugh, Dawn, you're supposed to make them bring their hand. The threat of them putting their hand down is why people crumble. What you do is you say, bring the hand down then. Put the foot down then. Do it. You know what I mean? Because that's how we actually push back. If we voluntarily crumble, you left on your own accord. You know what I mean? There's not as much rebuttal. There's not as much that you can do in return. Like when they told me here, I got called by the health department. I contacted by all these people. We're going to show up and we're going to shut you down. And I was like, all right, what day? And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, I'll be there. I'll sit out front. I'll record the entire interaction. And if I can't do what I know this is my calling to do, then I'm going to champion this cause in my life. So you're going to have me 100% campaigning against this. All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be an awesome podcast today. Right before we get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I'm not going to mess up your last name. I'm going to introduce Dawn Goryca. Dawn, I'm excited to hear this podcast because you recently went through like a tremendous life change. You went through working in one field that blew me away when I found out that you were a ballistics engineer, and now you're in farming. But the way that I start all my episodes is the way that I want to start this one as well. I don't want to know about who you are today yet. I want to go all the way back. You know, where were you born and raised? What were you like as a young kid? What was the family unit like? You know, the things that were influential to you as a child. And then we'll start to build up to your story today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here. And I was born and raised here in Michigan. I have two sisters, one older sister, one younger sister, mom and dad. So we lived in Farmington Hills and then moved to Livonia. For my whole life, well, basically 0 to 15, my sisters and I were always together. We were homeschooled together. We shared a room together. We basically did all of our activities together, so 24/7 with these same two people. My older sister's 2 years older than me. My younger sister is 2 years younger than me. And if I ever speak in we instead of I, it's because I always had sisters right there. So I'm talking about me and my sisters. And my first memory is actually with my sisters. My older sister anyway. She was riding her bicycle with no training wheels. And as I was either 3 or 4, she was 5 or 6. And so I assumed that I could ride my bicycle with no training wheels. So I talked my dad into taking the training wheels off my bicycle. I was riding in circles on the driveway, like super proud of myself and everything. And then I decided to ride up the walkway towards the house. And there's a 90-degree turn. And when I hit the 90-degree turn, my front wheel on the bicycle turned. The rest of me did not turn. And I still remember, like, the edging on the sidewalk rushing up towards my face. And then I hit my forehead, and I just blacked out. And that's, like, my first memory of life.
Wow. So you were like, hey, big sis can do this. This clearly means I can do it. Not that we're 2 years apart or anything like that. You jumped right in. It sounds like you had a cool childhood, though. I'm only here in the very beginning. You were super close to your siblings. You guys got along well your whole life?
Yeah, we got along well, or we figured it out. So my younger sister and I argued a little bit. I don't remember ever fighting with my older sister, but yeah, we were always together. So we got along really well, and we were best friends then, and we're still really close today.
Were you girls in athletics, or what were your loves when you were a young child? What were the things that, kind of lit you up or were big parts of life?
Yeah, I wasn't athletic at all. We didn't really do sports. We did gymnastics, like little kids gymnastics. And then when it got to the point where we would be competitive, we just stopped doing gymnastics. We did a few things, like maybe softball with the church league. I was homeschooled, and growing up in the 90s, that comes with a few stereotypes. So I was raised very religious. We went to church 3 days during the week and twice on Sundays. So that was a big part of my life. We ran around in the backyard. We lived in the suburbs, so we had about a half an acre, and then it backed up to like the edge of the forest that never got put into the subdivision. So we had a big backyard. We were just running around, riding our bikes, climbing trees, and then helping out with the family garden too.
So homeschooling is becoming a lot more popular nowadays. I mean, there's just all kinds of reasons for it. But back in the day, it was definitely more rare, and there were stereotypes around it. I remember people being like, "Oh, you're homeschooling," and it was kind of like, "Why would you do that?" Whereas now, people are like, "Man, I'm really considering homeschooling my children." What was that like for you? What were the things that you loved about it? Do you know why your parents made that choice to put their three daughters in homeschooling? And just kind of speak on that a little bit because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, so I know that my mom actually met someone when we were really little. So maybe my sister was 3 or 4, like not in school yet, and she met someone at the park who also had little kids. So this person was homeschooling their children, and she developed a friendship with them. And then she decided that she was going to homeschool her children. My mom was a teacher at some point in her life. She did not really spend a lot of time teaching. She was an engineer for most of her life, but she was a teacher, so I guess that maybe gave her the confidence, and she was like, "Yeah, I want to homeschool my 3 kids instead of schooling other people's kids." So,
Do you remember how you felt about it? Like, were you proud that you were in homeschool? Did you kind of resist, like, "Oh man, I'm not like the other kids. I should be in public school"? Do you remember it all?
so I remember basically I thought that my life was very normal and average because I have 2 sisters, right? I'm right in the middle, so my older sister, my younger sister, and I didn't have a lot of critical thinking skills about it. I mean, I was just like, "Yeah, this is my life. It's very normal. This is what we do," and I assumed that everybody else was weird and I was the normal one.
So you said you had a religious upbringing and your family was very religious. Are you still very religious to this day? Um, how did that impact you as a young girl? Just like talk about growing up in a religious home, because again, I grew up in a home without really any religion in it.
Yeah, so it was actually a little bit different than most people. Both of my parents have a very strong faith, Christian faith, and they chose to express that faith by going to 2 different churches. So one goes to the Catholic Church and one goes to the Protestant Church, which is pretty unusual. There's a lot of disagreements between those churches, and they don't always get along. But for me, again, that was just the normal in my life. So that happened when I was about 8 years old, actually. They were originally going to the same church together when they got married, and then it split up in a while. But my parents stayed together, and yeah, we just went to different churches.
That's wild. I definitely wouldn't think that because it's almost like this is our family church, and really you want your ideologies to be as close as possible because then there's less conflict. There's, if your father and mother are attending the same sermons, the same, information is coming in, you're on the same page. That's an interesting dynamic that your father and mother, although both religious, were bringing in different influences. And honestly, there's a certain critical thinking to that or an open-mindedness because that is definitely not the norm. You grew up to become an engineer, which I remember when you first told me that, I was very blown away. Like, because I had no idea. I was like, "Hey, Dawn, what do you do?" And you were homeschooled. So you went into a profession that doesn't see a lot of women, and you're very successful by getting to that level. Were your sisters, did they do well also? And how do you think the homeschooling set you up for success? I guess is the question that I'm doing, because public school does not produce many female engineers, especially in a ballistics lab. You could have been anything under the sun, but you chose to become an engineer. I really want to understand the tie-in there. That's what I'm fascinated by.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about my sisters, but first I'll start with so both my parents are engineers. My dad had us building bridges, making parachutes. Like he would drop them off the house, like we'd put an egg in there. So we were building balsa wood bridges. He came up with all these ideas for us to do activities with. And my mom was the one who mainly homeschooled us, but my dad would do all these fun activities just to help us learn. We brought the neighborhood kids in. I mean, it was just a lot of growing up. Everything was engineering.
So he was laying the foundation. Because I'm trying to make the connection in my head. I'm like, all right, she's getting homeschooled. She has these influences, a big sister, little sister. How in the world did she become an engineer? You had engineering influence right from a young age. You had someone teaching you how to think like an engineer, to problem solve, to build, to envision, to create. And those are great skills for life. When you were in middle school and high school, did you already know that was kind of your trajectory, or what did you think you were going to be when you got out of school?
So no, from a really young age, I would say, even at 9 or 10 years old, I was interested in farming. At 14, I told my mom I wanted to be an organic farmer, and she said, "No, you're going to college. You're going to get a real job." So I had about two marketable skills. I like to cook, and I was good at math because obviously we're very focused on math in homeschooling. Like you had to get the math right; there was no other option. So I told my mom I wanted to be a chef. I was going to go to culinary school, and she said, "No, that's not a good choice. You don't want to do that." And so I said, "Okay." I had to sit down and think about it. And like, well, I guess I'll be an engineer. So every adult in my life at that point was an engineer. You know, my mom and my dad were both engineers. Like their friends, a lot of engineers. So I was like, that's what you do. You grow up and you become an engineer.
So
That's the only option in life.
little Dawn didn't have a lot of pushback, a lot of rebellion, a lot of like, you can't tell me what to do. If I want to be a farmer, I'm going to grow up and be a farmer. Little Dawn was just kind of like, okay, Mom, it looks like I'm being an engineer. Because I'm not built like that. If someone's like, hey, you're going to do this, I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm going to do exactly what I want to do. You just kind of allowed the path, or like you just went with the stream. You go with the flow. Oh, I thought I wanted to be a farmer. Mom's like, no, you don't. You're going to school to be an engineer. You're like, looks like I'm going to be an engineer. Was that an easy transition? You just accepted that? Or was there a little bit of like, because now you're transitioning into farming from being an engineer. Did you have feelings of like, no, that's not what I want to do? Or was it not really that much in your spirit yet? And you were like, you know what? Okay, I'll just go be an engineer. That's where I'm going to find success. And with success, we think comes happiness.
Yeah, well, when you're a teenager, right, you don't know a lot of things. Like I didn't have any skills or resources. Like a kid, you have some things, but not really. And I didn't have any ability to think, okay, I know better than my mom. Like I didn't have a plan. I didn't have, I couldn't vocalize anything that I wanted beyond just, oh, I want to do this farming thing. And it didn't make sense to my mom. Nobody that I knew was doing it. It was just something that I wanted to do. And
honestly, though, most teenagers, they don't do that they don't think that like, oh, you don't know more than me. That the joke is that teenagers know everything about the world already. And they're like, I don't care what you say, Mom. This is what I'm going to do. Because that is like the rebellion they have. You weren't like that. You were more,
No.
you respected your mother. You respected your father. And they were guiding you. And you were accepting that guidance. You weren't pushing back against it as much.
Yeah, the joke that I have is as a teenager, I wasn't allowed to rebel. So that was definitely against the rules.
That is a hilarious line. Like, I wasn't allowed to rebel. Nobody's allowed to rebel. Everybody can rebel. They have the capacity for rebellion. But, the rebellion comes from within. It's not someone else's choice. It doesn't matter what my father would have said, like, you're not allowed to do this. I'd be like, guess what I'm going to do? You know what I mean? But you were like, oh, I guess I can't do that then. I'm picturing just like such an innocent, kind of naive, like nice young kid that was like, if Mom says this, like that's what we're going to do. And that's a better way to be. Like you had respect for your elders. If your mom told you that, she's laying out the pathway, you're going to listen to her and you're going to follow her. I have a lot of respect for that. I wasn't really like that. I was more jagged.
And some of that probably really did come from my religious background. Basically, you're raised like you definitely respect your parents. You honor what they say. And I mean, it's not a bad thing at all. It's something that I grew up with. And the idea of challenging my parents at age 14 or 15 just was not going to happen. It didn't even cross my mind.
That's huge. And there definitely are massive aspects from religion and other belief systems in general that are like really good tenets for success or like good pillars to build yourself on. Whether or not you choose to buy into the whole story or not, there are like really good foundations. Because there's some people that are like very anti-religious. They grew up in a religious home, so they become like anti-religious, but they don't acknowledge that like, you know what, there was a lot of great things for me in that system. They really did help me avoid some pitfalls. That helped me avoid going through like a rebellious stage that might lead to personal traumas and disaster and making mistakes. Like there's a lot of good in that, even if you don't fully accept the ideology later on.
Yeah, for sure. So that was when I was 15. When I was either 15 or 16, I started going to community college. So I was taking just a couple classes.
At 15 or 16, you were in college?
It was my last year of high school, so they were like dual credit courses. Remember, I was homeschooled, so my mom was just doing this thing. She had just gone through it with my older sisters, so my older sister was 2 years ahead of me, and she kind of had a pattern to follow. So she's like, yep, this is when you go to community college, and you get a couple of transfer credits. I took the ACT, so that's how I got into university. So I went to the University of Detroit Mercy.
And then, so you're going to the university, you're going to be an engineer. That's your major. Talk about your college experience. Was there any eye-opening things? Because I'm picturing now, like, I doubt you stayed on campus, but if you did, I really feel like there's going to be some good stories. But you come from being homeschooled in a religious family with, like, a pretty set forth path. if you went and lived on campus in a college, your whole world is going to be a snow globe. Someone's going to shake the shit out of it. And you'd be like, what is going on here? But if you commute, you might have been able to dodge some of that. So talk about your college days. Was there any life lessons or growth periods during that point? Was there any, thinking about something in a new way for the first time ever?
Yeah, there was a lot of things that happened in college. So, in community college, I don't have a lot of memories. That it was just 1 year. But when I started going to the university, I did live at home. I was still with my parents then, and I commuted to school. I was 17, turning 18, and when I got to be about that age, so after my first year of college, I decided that I wanted to become physically fit. That was when I first started going into athletics and stuff. So I remember I was at college and the university, and I went up to underneath the bleachers. They had a track. It was like 1/6 a mile, like this dingy little place. And I just ran around the track as fast as I could because I don't know how to work out. Nobody in my family works out, but I'm at college now. I'm going to be physically fit. This is what I've decided to do. So growing up, especially as a teenager, I spent a lot of time reading books, and in the book stories, you have basically the main character, and they go on the hero's journey, and so I was like, well, this is my journey, and this is what I'm going to do. So I decided that I'm going to be physically fit. I'm up here on this track. I run around as fast as I possibly can, and I'm super tired. I've never run any distance before in my life, so I walk around in a circle. I wait till my breathing calms down. I run around the track again. I do 6 times. I ran a whole mile. That was my first workout. I'm just running around this track and then waiting till I feel better. And that was what I started out doing. And so pretty quickly I decided, well, I don't know what I'm doing here. I want to do this better. So on the internet one day I find a comment that's like, oh, you should do this CrossFit thing. It's the best thing ever. So I find a gym. This is 2009, so there's 2 gyms in the whole area for CrossFit. And so my mom actually goes to the gym with me because I'm still 18 right now. And I do my first CrossFit workout, and this is amazing. This is exactly what I want to do. So I start doing CrossFit. And that's actually what helped balance out a lot of my college experience. I'm doing CrossFit, and that's, really developing physically. And then I'm doing engineering, which is very math-based and focused on school. So
that's a great balance. And you're taking care of your mind, your body, and then in turn your spirit or your energy, whatever you'd want to call it. You're kind of making sure you're doing the right things in multiple areas. So the fitness journey, did that come from a self-image thing? Did that come from, relationships being a bigger priority? Did that come from you were out of shape? Were you overweight? Why one day did you just decide, I'm going to start a fitness journey too?
So I think that was something that was building over time. I just felt like I wasn't a very physically fit person. Like I said, I read a lot of books, and in the hero's journey, they always start doing a training program. They always start getting more physically fit, and that was something I always felt the lack of in my life. So when I was 17, I was 15 pounds heavier than I am now, and I had no muscles, seriously no muscles. So my family went on a canoe trip, just rented canoes for an hour or two, when we canoed up and down the river. There was nothing intense about it. And then the next day I was painfully sore just from canoeing a boat around for an hour.
You're like, how can I be the hero of my story if I can't even canoe this boat around? I need to make some changes. That's hilarious. So you go into CrossFit, and you said your mom went with you. Your mom went and trained CrossFit with you the first time?
No, she went my first day just to see what I was getting myself into.
So she just took you to the CrossFit facility? Because I'm picturing mom's never really done anything. She jumps into CrossFit with her daughter. So you get into CrossFit. Does it become an addiction? Because usually when you find something new that's building you, it's making you feel good, you're getting endorphins in your brain. Did that become when you weren't at school, you made sure you got your training in? And then how did that help you change over time? What started changing in your life once you got into fitness?
Yeah, that was a big focus of mine for sure. So I worked out at least 5 days a week. I was always at the gym. When I wasn't doing school, obviously. So I did school, I did CrossFit, and then I was still living at home with my family. So there was the family activities that we did together, and it was a big part of my life. I read everything I could about it. I always liked reading, so it was something that I had a lot of interest in. I was learning more about it. I talked all of my sisters and my friends into trying out workouts. I was trying to teach them the movements I was learning, and that went somewhat well, somewhat not well, trying to drag someone else into something that you're into. And yeah, it was just something that I was a big part of. And then my sisters and I started playing soccer and volleyball. Like we were doing more just group activities with different young adults. So that was something we did together.
That makes sense because once you start getting into fitness, there are so many avenues of fitness. And if you're feeling better and you can do a wider range of activities and, like you like the feeling that you get when you work out hard, now all of a sudden playing the volleyball game sounds like a blast. Playing the soccer game is going to be enjoyable versus if you're not in fitness, you're like, I'm going to run around back and forth for an hour. No way. It's like people don't realize what they're missing. You know what I mean? Until you get into that. And then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, definitely. Let's do some water volleyball today. And it does make life more enjoyable and it's very healthy for you in a society that is very, we tend to sit a lot. We tend to not take care of ourselves a lot. We're so focused on things that are external from us very often that we're not taking care of the internal well enough. And it's like if you take care of your body and your mind better, you're going to be more successful across a wide variety of things that you do, which will then in turn make you feel better, which will reinforce your habits, right? So I want to try to understand the Dawn that was growing up a little bit better before we go to the next chapter of your story. What were the books that really hit you hard? Because you were referencing the hero's journey. You said you read a lot. So I'm really trying to get into the psyche of young Dawn. What were the books that you really attached to or you felt like you drew a lot of meaning from or that you were inspired by or your vision of the world or your outlook? Just help me understand the Dawn that existed. Were there a couple books that stood out to you that made a big impression?
So I don't know if there were any specific books, but I did read a lot. So my dad, shout out to my dad, he spent over a decade reading us books at night. Parents read to their little kids. My dad was reading us books when we were 10, 11, 12 years old. Sometime when we got to be about 12, he stopped reading to us. But he would always read us books. And they weren't kids' books either. He was reading us Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, C.S. Lewis, the Screw Tape Letters, all these different things. And they were interesting stories. And I just wanted to learn more about the world. And that was basically how I experienced the whole world. And my mom would take us to the library every single week. So I would just check out books. And there was a lot of kids' books. I read about the ponies and all the other things, but also things that I was interested in, like wild birds of North America or just anything that I was interested in. I would get the topics of the books and just read them. That was basically my own self-directed learning.
So you've always kind of had an appetite for learning, and it probably came from your environment or maybe the homeschooling or your father being an engineer, your mother being an engineer. You had an appetite for wanting to take in information and understand it from a young age.
Yeah, this was how I learned about the world outside of my home. We did do activities. Obviously, we went to church. We did other things, but this was the most exposure I got to the outside world besides just being at home.
So now one thing I haven't heard a single peep about in your story the entire time is relationships. What type of relationships are going on in your life with boys or, your first boyfriend, relationships that you're in when you're going into college? It sounds like I'm kind of picturing who you were growing up. I see the intellectual that is being formed and the path that you're following. Did you have any others by your side at this point that are helping to shape you grow up? Do you have good experiences, bad experiences? Is dating just very far down the list? I'm going to become successful first and then we'll figure out if that's in the cards for me. Let's talk some about that.
So yeah, relationships is an area of life that I've struggled with a lot. I did not date anyone as a teenager. I was too shy to talk to boys that I liked.
All the way through being 19, never dated anybody?
When I was 19 years old, I remember having a crush on somebody. I just knew in passing, and it took me a month to say hi to this person. That was the whole conversation, just hi. And
he just looks at you, he's like, hey.
That was when I was 19 years old.
Wow. So now do you think, although you've gotten so many tremendous things from homeschooling, do you think that was in somewhat a little bit of the cause of that? Because when you're thrown in public school, you don't understand this, but you're just in this melting pot of this army of little kids from every different background, every different color, social status, attitude level, and you just have to find a way to fit in, or you will get trampled. They will put you on the bottom of the hierarchy, and they will run you over. So it kind of forces you to learn how to talk to a wide group of people. Do you think that that is one of the setbacks that some homeschooling children may face, is they don't have the same social skills because you've been in your own nest more than most people?
I think that's definitely a possibility, but I mean, I could talk to all the boys that I wasn't interested in, so I don't know if you can blame it exactly on that. Maybe that was definitely a contributing factor. I probably, grew up slower than most people just because I wasn't around an incredibly diverse group of people growing up. But then I was in college, and all of my classmates were male, but I was super focused on school at that point, so I was not interested in dating, like, completely just probably gave off a vibe, like, do not ask me out because I'm going to say no. So I did not date anyone in college.
Until the guy you said hi to, he was the one you said hi, and he was like, "Hey, what's going on?" So
Yeah, that was not a relationship.
no, I'm just kidding. So you're getting through college, you're on track to become an engineer. Let's just start to build as you get out of college, or if there's any big moments in college that shaped you, and then what's your first jump into corporate America? Were you able to get right into a spot or et cetera?
So actually, while I'm going to college, I start working at the place I worked at my whole life. So I got an internship. My school focused on that. Basically, you go through your first year of college, and they're like, okay, you need to get an internship. You're going to have a class that reviews your internship from the summertime. So like, you find one, or we're going to help you find one. And I applied to this place. It's in Warren, Michigan. It's called the Tank Armaments Command. Basically, most people know it as TARDEC. It's changed its name since then, but when I was working there, it was known as TARDEC, so that's how I refer to it. And I started working at TARDEC in the summer of 2009 when I was 17, turning 18, and that was my first experience of work. My mom actually worked there not her whole life, but for a long time, so I knew of it. But I worked in a different building than my mom. It wasn't like she hired me on her team or anything. It was just I applied to the summer hire position that's open to anybody, and I got selected as one of the applicants for that. So it's a big group of summer hires that they have, so it's a temporary position.
So you grew up in homeschool, you go to college, you're on the path that your mother laid out before you, you're doing it. Now you get into being an engineer. What are your first impressions when you start working, when you're just an intern, when you don't really know what you're getting into yet? What were your first impressions? And then, when did they actually offer you a spot with the company? And then let's talk about like how your emotions or feelings or just how you changed over time in that environment.
Yeah, so in the first summer hire experience that I had, they put me and four other summer hires. They were all guys, like in this back room with like nobody else around, and that was a really intense experience because because there was more of them than there was me, and we were going through basically like we had some work to do, but not all of the work to do because you're an intern. So what are they really gonna give you? But it was an interesting experience. So I worked there all summer, and after that, you sort of get to know people. So I knew someone that was in a position on a team, and they were like, "Hey, you should come work for this team." So after the summer hire position, I got hired as an intern. So then, like, you're actually hired by the company. Well, it's the federal government that I was working for. So I'm working for the federal government. I'm actually like a full-time employee, but they give you time to go back to school. So it's I forget what it's called. It's some type of leave. Yeah, it's basically leave without pay to go back to school while you're not there working.
Got it. So what kind of tasks were you given? Because were you given good guidance when you went into the company and like, hey, this is what we do here. These are the projects we're working on. These are the problems we're trying to solve. This is our system. This is, like, did they paint out what you were supposed to be doing and give you vision and get you to understand the company? Or were you kind of just there in the environment, kind of learning as you go through observation?
No, I was working in the non-destructive testing lab. They had an ultrasonic phased array thingy that it it's this thing that goes in a tub of water. It scans back and forth. You can basically see inside of metal, and you can detect defects inside the metal as long as you get the software to work and the machinery to work. So I'm working inside a lab, and I'm figuring out how to use this software program that no one knows how to use because it's a computer, and they're all in their, I don't know, 40s or 50s or 60s, and so I'm basically figuring this thing out as I go. And the whole summer, that's what I worked on. And then at the end of the summer, you kind of have to do like an ex post. I had some scanned things I put on a poster. So like, these are the scans I took this summer. And yeah, it was basically just imaging metal.
Got it. So now you get hired onto the company and you're on a different team. You start getting into the workforce. What is life like at this point? Like, are you enjoying it? Do you like what you're doing? Just speak on that.
So yeah, they're rotating me around. So all interns, like basically, they want you to get experience on 3 different teams. So I'm going through different teams, and I am basically at the point where I'm just showing up every day with a positive attitude and being like, okay, what am I gonna do here? But I'm not really enjoying the work at this point. A lot of it is just like, well, this is what I'm doing. This is the path that I'm on, and I'm investing my time and my schooling into getting good at this, and it's a good job. So I'm going to try to figure it out.
So basically, I mean, mom said, "Hey, this is what I have to do," and now you're here, like, "Well, I'm doing it." But like, now what? What's the point of it? What's next? How do I build? What real information am I acquiring at this point? Where is this going to lead me? Et cetera, et cetera. And now, so you're like 18, 19 at this point when you get hired in, or
Yeah. So I was 18 or 19, and then
I didn't even ask. How old are you today?
30.
Yeah, okay. So we got about a decade to cover. So you're working with this team. When do you officially get hired onto the team? And then, like, is that a salary position with the federal government? Or, like, how do you make the next big jump? And then let's just talk about, like, any pivotal moments of your career where, like, you were really happy about what you were doing, moments in your life where you started to question and say, this isn't what I'm meant to do. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. But let's just talk about any like powerful moments that you can reflect on that you remember.
Yeah, so I graduated in 2012 with my bachelor's degree, and the University of Drake Mercy had a 5-year master program. So my mom was really encouraging me to go for my master's degree. So I start working full time in September 2012, and I start taking classes, basically 3 master's classes in the evening, and I'm doing the working during the day, and I'm not enjoying any of it. It's really not something that I'm interested in. Like, the most interesting thing in my life at that point is doing my CrossFit workouts. So that's kind of like balancing out what I'm doing. I'm really struggling at this point because I've spent so much of my life at home. It's hard to go somewhere for 8 hours a day and work there. And like, growing up homeschooled, like, you have so much motivation to get your stuff done because then you can go play with your sisters. Like, you want to get your schoolwork done, and you have to do it well because otherwise you're going to sit there with your mom and figure it out later. So you want to get your schoolwork done well. You want to get it done and then go play with your sisters or whatever else you want to do in life. And this is like, you're going to show up, you're going to be here for 8 hours, whether you're doing something or not, whether you're interested in it or not. And this is just your life now. And then after you finish work, you're going to go to school and get a master's degree, which is not easy. But I decided at that point in my life, I was still just like 21 or 22, and it was easier for me to get a master's degree in engineering than it was to say no to my mom. So I was like, well, I'm doing this now. So yeah, that's what I did. And it was 2 semesters, basically. I took a few master's classes in my last year of my bachelor's degree, so I finished that in 2013. And so now it's the summer of 2013, and I'm not particularly happy at work, but I'm on a different team. I actually moved to 5 different teams, and then I eventually settled at the one I liked. So in the summer of 2014 was when I moved back to the ballistics lab. So I had spent 6 months on the ballistics lab in one of my rotations, basically between school and work. And so I knew I wanted to go back there because that was like the only place I was happy at work. So I'm like, I want to be back on this team, but I was waiting for a spot to open, and I was on this other team. But I would say my work career started probably in the summer of 2014 when I actually joined the team that I spent most of my time at. And before that time, I was kind of just like struggling, like, I don't want to be here, but this is my life now. So
yeah, that's the part that I wanted to dig into next. So you're going through this grind. You're doing all of these things for someone else. I mean, you're doing it for you too, but your heart and passion is not in it. You're not getting pulled out of bed in the morning like, man, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. Like, my vision board came true. You're just kind of doing it because you were told that you had to do it. And this is what success was painted to you as. Like, hey, this is the American dream. Go get your master's degree, show up at this place, get your paycheck, rinse and repeat for the next 40 years until you retire, and then go see the world. That's like the story that a lot of people, and I could see you just took a deep breath.
yeah,
like,
it was pretty bad.
oh boy, like, I don't want to do that. But you were just doing it to be like a good kid, a good citizen, a good whatever it was. The way you said it was easier to do that than to say no to my mother. I want to meet the fireball and powerhouse of a mother that you have, because I would have been like, nope, I'm not doing it. But so you're going through all this, you get back on the ballistics team. You are enjoying work a little bit now.
Yeah, so I really like the team at the ballistics lab. I like the fact that there's a lab, so I'm not sitting in front of a computer all day or just going to meetings and doing PowerPoints and stuff. Like, that was what I was really struggling with. I was like, I don't really want to be on a computer all day. I don't want to go to these meetings where I'm still just a kid. Like, I don't know what they're talking about in these meetings. Like, I'm trying to learn, but it's not going particularly well. And it was still a good experience, guess, basically just to see like what I was not interested in. And I was on the PM for self-propelled howitzers, basically a project management position where like there are meetings with like majors and colonels and like like a lot of high-ranking army stuff. So it's interesting in that respect, but not interesting in that like I'm a 22-year-old kid and I don't know what I'm doing here.
So you avoided like the bar scene, alcohol, drugs, depression, having a mental breakdown trying to juggle all these things at once with no passion in it. You didn't really have any traumatic events?
So what happened for me at least was I think I just burned it all off doing my CrossFit workouts. So that was the thing that was
That was
balancing
your
out my
escape.
life. Yeah, like the going to the gym, like a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to exercise, but for me that was always my reward. Like I'm going through all this stuff, but I'm going to the gym that I love. Like I had a great community there. There were coaches that were investing in my success. Like I started there when I was 18 and like they're like, who's this 18-year-old kid coming here working out? And I actually want to talk about that a little bit. When I started doing CrossFit, I was very non-athletic. I couldn't do push-ups. I couldn't do pull-ups. Like, I couldn't do any of this stuff. Like, you could have sat there with $1 million in a briefcase and, like, John, just do one push-up and I will give you all of this money. And I'm like, I'm physically incapable of doing a push-up. I cannot do this. I was doing, like, push-ups, like, on an angle from a box, like they have the jump boxes. Like, I was seriously very unfit and non-athletic. And I was just, but you're 18, so you're like, I'm good at everything. You just don't realize how bad you are, even as you're going through, like, being terrible objectively.
So you're going into CrossFit. You stay with this all the years. You did CrossFit until when?
2018.
So, yeah, you really went all in on CrossFit. Almost 10 years. And it really was shaping you, right? Like, and you're feeling better about your body. It's your escape from just the monotonous routine that you're involved in. You can push your limits and yourself and feel that sense of like, I'm getting better. Because that's like one of the best feelings in the world is seeing progress. Like being the woman that's like, I can't push myself off the earth in a push-up to being like, I'm starting to do well at this. I'm starting to, get better through the exercises. I'm feeling better. I have a great community of people that are supporting me. How in the world do you get into jiu-jitsu? Because I know you as the jiu-jitsu girl. I don't know you as the CrossFit girl. Where does that come into the mix?
That happens in 2018. So do you want to do that now or later?
No, we'll get to that point.
Yeah, we're only in 2014.
Yeah, we're in 2014 right now. So you keep chugging along on the current path that you're on. What are any major road bumps or, pitfalls or difficult events that take place or like shaping events, the things that you think we should discuss, and we'll start to move towards those, more current times?
So I would say like the difficult years was probably from 2012, the fall of 2012 to the summer of 2014. That was when I was really struggling to feel good at work, like figure out what was going on. And by the time I got to the summer of 2014, I moved onto the ballistics lab. Like things were going really well. Like I felt like I had a good team at work. I knew what I was doing. I liked this CrossFit thing I was doing. My sisters and I were still doing activities together. We started doing like my sister was interested in dancing. That's my younger sister. So I started like learning swing dancing, ballroom dancing, all these different things, and that was really enjoyable. So basically, I'm going to work and doing fun activities in my free time. So that was from 2014 on up until, I guess the next most difficult thing would be in 2016. So until then, I'm basically just working. Things are going. I'm still living at my parents' house. So now in 2016, it was I tried dating a couple people in my early 20s, but things didn't work out. There was never a relationship. It was just kind of went on a couple dates and like this isn't working. So I would say when I was 25 years old was the first time I had any significant relationship, and we weren't dating. I knew we weren't dating. We were just friends, but we would like go to a coffee shop and just meet up and talk about life for 2 hours or something. So sometimes it felt like dating, and I wanted to be in a relationship with this guy, and eventually I actually brought it up like as a topic, like, do you want to be in a relationship? Like, is this ever is this ever a thing that's going to happen? And that conversation really didn't go well. And he basically stopped talking to me after that, and like there was no more friendship. And this was a person I had known for, probably 2 or 3 years. And I guess maybe it was just like, super awkward for him or whatever, and he didn't see it that way. So anyway, this had a really significant impact on my life, and this was probably the first time I ever felt like depressed or like, all the things I had been doing in life, like it didn't matter anymore. Like all these accomplishments, all these achievements, they didn't feel important. And it was like kind of like this relationship, like it felt like, like the end of the world. But obviously it wasn't, but that's just what it felt like.
Yeah, no, but emotions, especially the first time you go through them, the first time you go through like a super difficult event, it can rock your world. So you felt a connection with that person. You wanted that person. When there's desire and things like that, and especially if we start crafting a story in our brain about like what life is going to be like, if we start dating and like, oh man, it'll be him and I together, and then I got my job, I got this, and then all of a sudden that story is taken away from you because you're like, hey, I'm going to, speak this story into the world. And the person's like, I don't see that story. Now you're like, wait, what? That is devastating. And if it's the first time you've gone through a heartbreak like that, it can rock you, because so many people might hear that story and go like, oh, that's not that bad. Yeah, but it depends on your experiences. If you've never really experienced any form of heartbreak yet from a significant other or a male or someone that you're interested in, that's the first time. So now you're like, I'm an engineer. I'm going to school to get my master's. I'm in shape. I'm friendly. You're like, like, what's going on here? And then a lot of times you question like, well, what's wrong with me? What should be different? What's that? And I don't know if that happened to you, or if you rationalize it like, well, it's just this person is not interested in this at this period of time. What starts to bring you out of it?
So for me, I actually started to question my whole worldview. Like everything I had been taught, like it feels like it didn't work out. Like I did all of the right things. Obviously, like that's in quotation marks.
That's the story you painted to me when I was sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, man, this young girl is going like, I'm doing everything I thought I was supposed to do. Like, why am I facing rejection? That is a strange question to sit on.
Yeah, so that was definitely a struggle. At the same time, my younger sister had actually met somebody, and so she's engaged to a guy, and they're going to get married. This is all happening around 2016 when I'm 25 years old, and we're all still living at home. Basically, the way we were raised, you basically lived at home until you got married. And so my younger sister, she's engaged. She's going to get married. And
what about your older sister?
She might be dating someone at this point. She was in a couple different relationships that were like for 2 years or so, but I don't remember if she was dating someone or not at the time. And she...
No, I get it, because now all of a sudden it's like, well, what's wrong with me? Look
Yeah.
at my little sister is getting engaged. She has this relationship. She's getting the fairy tale. Where's my fairy tale? I can picture it.
Yeah. So I was super happy for my younger sister. She found a great guy, and they got married. And right about that time, while they were still engaged and like they're planning their wedding, all this is going on. It's the fall of 2016, this winter of 2017. I'm basically struggling a lot with life, like, just going through the motions, trying not to feel anything because I'm like super devastated about this relationship that didn't happen. And obviously it's a first world problem, right? Like, I'm not trying to be like, oh, my life was terrible. Like, I still have a supportive family that loves me and everything. So I'm not super depressed, but I'm just not interested in life anymore. I'm like this, like, I tried to do all the right things and it didn't work out. So I'm just going to keep going through the motions. And what happened was my sister met someone who is of another different faith. He's Orthodox. So my sister's going to be Orthodox now because she's getting married to this guy. And so there was another argument in our family over religion. This is a reoccurring thing. There has been a lot of conflict over that. And I'm sort of tangentially related here. Like, I'm not the one who's the focus of the argument, but it's just on top of everything else that I was experiencing. It was too much for me. So it's like 3:00 in the morning and I can't sleep or something. So I'm like, I'm going to move out of the house. So I get up and I start packing my things at 3:00 in the morning. And the next day I tell my parents I'm going to move out of the house. And so I start looking for apartments. And like a week later, I just moved out into an apartment because I was like, I don't want to be here anymore and deal with all the stuff going on.
it was like a light switch. You literally said, nope, not anymore. I'm changing it. I got to go. You knew you were having internal struggles and there was a battle, and the environment that you're in was not conducive of a healthy, just place for you to sort through the issues. And you just up and started packing at 3 a.m. next morning, told your parents, I'm moving out, and then did it.
Yeah, it was kind of like a long time coming, right? So I'm 25 years old. I've been working full time for a long time. So, like, I'm definitely in a position where I could have moved out
It was
earlier.
the last straw.
Yeah, it was just the last straw. It wasn't even about the argument or anything. It was just like, this is a point in my life, and, like, this is a breaking point. And, like, I felt like if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. Like, I'm just going to live at home forever and never be able to, like, stand on my own and do something.
So you go out, you get your own apartment, you stood on your own 2 feet. Now all of a sudden you're not there for dinner with the family. The sisters aren't next to you all the time. You're sitting alone in your own apartment, unless you're over there all the time.
No, that's not how it. So my younger sister actually moved out with me. She's the one getting married. So my sister and I move out into an apartment
Together. Okay, so that's a huge, because I'm picturing, oh man, you put yourself into loneliness on top of it. This story's about to get dark. Your sister went with you.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, and so I still obviously, I have my routine, right? So I'm going to work, I'm going to CrossFit, I'm like doing all of these things that are basically keeping me in a healthy place because I can't sit and think about it. I have to wake up for work every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning and get to work and then go to my gym and work out. So I think that's probably what helped not being as caught in a cycle of depression. And I've always had a fairly cheerful personality. Like, it's just not in my nature. Like, even when I'm super depressed about something, I'm still, like, smiling and bouncing around. And I'm like, I feel horrible. I don't know why I'm looking happy right now, but that's just my nature. So
I've actually always been the same way. Even if I'm, like, really devastated by something or really struggling, like, I am a happy person. I'm a very, like, I love people. I love life. And, like, even if I'm kind of devastated and I'm working through some things, it's just our nature. It's not, you know what I mean? It's so that can almost be deceptive to people because they just see you and they're like, oh, everything's normal. But in your own mind, it's like not at all normal and you are struggling. But your persona almost just keeps the wheels moving. You know what I mean? And I think you actually just touched on something super important. We live in a society where we don't have a lot of time. We are so busy. We're so like, you have to go to the next thing. You have to get up for work the next day. You have to keep the wheels moving. That in those moments in life, you need time to sit down and stare at the darkness that you're facing. And when I use the word the darkness, I always mean like whatever you're going through, that is the darkness, whether it's the struggle you're having or someone that's battling with an addiction or mistakes they made or trauma. You need time to sit and look at that darkness and then figure out how to structure it correctly in your brain or pull the lessons that you need from it or, just work through it so that you can let it go. But we're so busy that people do the exact opposite. They take whatever's going on, they put it in the filing cabinet in the back of their brain, and they're like, I'm just going to keep moving forward because I'm not going to sit at home alone because my mind will drive me nuts. Whereas the healing comes from actually being able to face the difficult situations and create proper perspective and, accept what is and what we can't control and like kind of move on. But we live in a society that doesn't really allow that. As soon as you start being the broken down person, usually people don't want to be around you. As soon as you start complaining or you're depressed or, like everybody has their own shit. So they're like, oh man, like I hope you get it together soon. You know what I mean? And that's something that is a huge struggle, I think, for young people because you can't press pause, but you have to have time to heal.
yeah, so one of the things that came out of that part of my life is that I think I actually developed more compassion for people. Basically, I felt my own internal struggle, and I was like, well, if I'm feeling this way and still going around acting normal, like there's probably a lot of other people in the world who have gone through, like really difficult experiences, and they're just going around like normal, doing what you need to do in life. And I felt that interpersonal relationships, like not just romantic relationships, like all interpersonal relationships were more important to me then because I understood how they could just be taken away from you. Like someone can just stop talking to you overnight and there's nothing you can do about it. It's outside of your control. It's completely, like I was going to the library at this point, checking out books on psychology and emotional intelligence and philosophy and anything that I thought would help, to like just understand like how brains work and like how relationships work and how people work because I'm super focused on engineering. Like my brain is very analytical. It's not something that I had spent a lot of time thinking about. and that probably contributed to my lack of relationship success.
100%. And emotions are very like they're not very tangible. They're hard to understand. And there's so many like subtle things and, body language, and like there's so much more than black and white on a piece of paper. Dawn, we need to get this angle for this velocity for that. Like that's a math equation. And I think my brain is extremely similar to yours. I don't really like all the messy stuff like that. I like straightforward, give me an algorithm, give me a formula, give me an equation, give me something that is tangibly, real, that I can prove to be right or wrong. And that's easy to deal with. It's really difficult to navigate the other space. But I feel like I have a certain advantage in the way that I have a magnetism that people kind of always want to be around me. Like I have a very positive energy. So even if I'm struggling with things, I kind of like attract people in my life, and then I can kind of build back up from that. But I understand with someone with a very analytical brain, you can miss out on the social skills and the emotional skills and the other things that are crucial to forming relationships that are going to yield happiness and the things that you're seeking in this life. Because if you don't have happiness, you don't have fulfillment, it does not matter what job you have, it doesn't matter how much money you make, it doesn't matter where you live, you're not going to enjoy this thing. And the real joy comes from connectivity with people. Happiness is internal, but like you want to be connected to people. That's what enhances life. The companion, the family member, the new friend, the guy at the coffee shop that you're lit up about, So it's like this whole skill set that although you might have been very, you had a lot of expertise in your craft, you had to dive into this. Looking back, would you say that you went through some of the most character growth and progress during those tough times?
Oh yeah, I mean that was something that definitely like completely reshaped the whole rest of my life. I was always a very goal-driven person. Obviously, like I set these goals and like I'm going to do whatever it takes to meet these goals because that's what I'm doing with my life. And like I like making checklists and checking things off, and definitely very focused on that. And then I got to a point where it was like none of this matters. Like it's not important to me. Like I at that time at age 25, I felt like I no longer have any goals for my life. Like it was like I'm like thinking about how long my grandma lived, like I have 50 more years here on this planet, and like there's nothing I want to do like at all with my life. Like I tried everything I was told to do. I tried finding a relationship, and like I'm like just completely like I'm not interested in this anymore.
Dawn, that is massive what you're saying right now, because who gives a shit about the ability to complete tasks if your heart is not in it? If it's not yielding the feelings that we need to move forward. This is really, really powerful stuff that you're talking about right now. And I bet you a lot of people experience this. And then they have this void or this like, they're missing what they really are searching for. And then it just makes all of life gray. There's like this giant black cloud over your head that like, from the outside, someone sees you smiling, they see you doing your thing, you're an engineer, you have your master's degree, you have both your parents are still alive, you have siblings, but you're just living in this state of like, I am not fulfilled and I have to change this thing. So what finally gets you out of it, or what is like the light switch moment or the piece that allows you to start building back up in a better direction?
Yeah, so I had just moved out of my parents' house and with my younger sister, and then she's getting married, so she's obviously not going to be there for much longer. And so my older sister and I actually start looking for a house. And in 2017, June 2017, we buy a house together. And we move into
Now,
this
does she
house.
have a man in the picture at this time, or is it
No,
like is he moving in with you, or is it just you two?
no, it's just the two of us. I don't think she's dating anyone at this point. She definitely had a relationship before this, but she wasn't dating anyone at the time. And our younger sister's getting married. We've moved out of that house. Like so slowly, she's like, we're gonna find a house. We're gonna buy it. We're gonna do this together. So, yeah, we buy a house together, and then there's a ton of things that we have to do. We have to fix the garage roof. We have to make sure the house is functioning. We have to figure out what paint we're putting on the walls. Like there's so much stuff to think about that. I think it kind of broke me out of the cycle of like just trying to go over everything that happened in the cycle of the relationship and like what went wrong. Like, just the like depression a lot of times is just like reviewing events that happen that you can't change, and you just need something to break out of the cycle.
100%. And now all of a sudden you have all these tasks ahead of you that you have to be engaged for, and someone else is counting on you. A lot of times if it's only for you and you're struggling with depression, you can't really do it. But if there's somebody else involved, whether that be your child or someone that depends on you or a sister, a lot of the times we can give our best, even if our best is, very low level compared to when we're at our best, for others when we can't even do it for ourselves. Because I've experienced that at times in my life where I was at a stage where like nothing mattered to me and I didn't really care about anything. But like if there was somebody that I loved, I had a good place in my heart for that needed something, I would still find a way to do it for them. You know what I mean? And like in a weird way that like refills your cup even though you're giving to them. So you put yourself in a good state. You're starting to rebuild. You're, focusing on the things you need to do, which is keeping you out of that darkness, right? And the way that you just said that about depression, I think that was gold insight where you said like, you got to review the events. The truth can be like super painful, super uncomfortable. You don't want it to be the way that it is. But if you don't make the relationship with reality as it is, it will torment you for the rest of your life because you're going to be delusional. You're not going to pull what you needed from those lessons, whether it's about growing as a person, developing your skills, what you could have done differently, not blaming the other person. You have to review the pain. You've got to stare back at the darkness and say, what can I shed light on that would make this event not so devastating, and then when we do that, we heal. And time helps a lot too. The further away events get, the less painful they generally are, but I've seen some people that their entire lives are shaped by one moment, and for the rest of their lives, they're never the same, and they never go back over that event. They run from it, they are traumatized by it, and then they live like a jaded life because of one thing that they never went back to review. So it's massive that you did. So this is late 2017. You and your sister move in. Everything's going together. You're kind of on the grind together. Does life start to get better for you? And then 2018 is when Jiu-Jitsu comes into the picture?
Yeah. So 2017, things get better. I'm in a new house with my sister. It's going really well. I mean, we like our new house. We're putting in gardens. We're putting in fruit trees. So my whole life I've spent gardening and all this stuff. So now we have all this space. And we can basically prioritize. I get along really well with my older sister. We've always had a great relationship, and the two of us are just going back and forth, sort of setting up the house, the outside, everything. That's going really well. Life is good. I'm still doing
still
CrossFit.
In the ballistics lab, still in CrossFit.
In the ballistics lab, yeah.
So everything else is kind of the same.
Everything else is the same, yeah. So this is just a lot of stuff going on in my personal life. Then the ballistics lab, that's all normal. And then so the thing I guess that changes next is jiu-jitsu. So we can get into that.
How in the world does that come into the picture? I mean, obviously if you have the capacity for CrossFit and you can push yourself like that, there are phenomenal things that you'll enjoy about jiu-jitsu. And it's not just you versus you. When you show up and you're having a little bit of a tough day and your training partner's like, I don't care. Like you have to battle their willpower on top of it. So if you were feeling the progress and success for CrossFit, it's almost a perfect lead-in to jiu-jitsu. But how does that conversation come up? What makes you explore that? How do you even hear the words for the first time? Were you aware of jiu-jitsu? Explain that to me.
When I was a little kid growing up, I kind of always had this idea in my head, when I get older, I want to learn horseback riding, ballroom dancing, and martial arts. Like, it just seemed cool to me as a little kid, right? So I had actually done like 3 months of horseback riding, as a younger adult, like, I don't know, probably 2013, something like that. But it turns out that horses are really big and they step on your feet, and it just, it was like, this is not for me. So that was horseback riding. I did ballroom dancing for 5 years, maybe more. So I spent a lot of time like swing dancing, ballroom dancing, salsa dancing. I was actually at a dance studio learning West Coast swing. So every Monday night I would be there. We would be learning these steps because a lot of dances, like, I've always enjoyed learning movement patterns. CrossFit, you're learning all these different exercises. Ballroom dancing, you're learning all these different ways to move your feet basically within time to the music. And then in 2018 or so, March of 2018 was when I switched, and my dance instructor was actually moving out of state. He was moving to Indiana. So it was like, well, I either have to start over at a new dance studio or I have to find a new hobby. So I picked the new hobby. I just did an internet search, like martial arts studios close to my house, and I found this one. It was close to my house, and they had, a decent website with the instructor had a video. So the place is called Kaizen. The instructor was Ryan Fiorenzi, and I was like, well, this looks like a good spot. So I just signed up for their introductory class, and I went in. and I hated it.
I was going to say, give me your honest first impression. As an engineer who everything is tangible, you know you're successful in your field, you're doing all these other things, you have a bunch of skills, you go into a room where people are going to strangle you. Tell me about the experience. What was your first impression of jiu-jitsu?
So my first 3 weeks of jiu-jitsu, I wanted to quit every single day.
Why'd you keep going?
So I identified as an athlete at that point. I'd been doing CrossFit for a really long time. There's this thing called the forward shrimp, and I couldn't do it. I had a brown belt, like very patiently explaining to me all of the steps, like this is how you move your body, this is what you do. I'm listening to him, I'm watching him do it, and I'm like, I cannot physically move in this direction. Like it's really bad. And
you're someone that loves movement patterns. You do dance, you do all these different things. You're like, why can I not get this?
Yeah, like I can do reverse or regular shrimping just fine. Like this is totally normal. And then I'm like, I can't get this movement. Like I can't. And I'm also like obviously a little bit more physically fit than average, and so I come in, I start rolling basically right away, and I'm getting hurt because I don't know that you're supposed to keep your chin tucked, so I bounce my head off the mats. I don't know that you're supposed to keep your elbows in, so someone rolls over my thumb, and I'm like, oh, I just can't use that for a week, and just like little, like not big injuries, but just like little hurt, and I'm like, this is awful. Like this is not what I was expecting. I was like expecting something like dancing, like you're learning all these movement patterns, probably something like karate, but I'm at a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu place. So basically 3 weeks I'm going back and forth. I'm like, I want to quit, but I keep going back because, this is the thing that I've decided to do and I can't get forward shrimping. And then after 3 weeks, I'm like, okay, you have to make a decision. Like you can't just keep wanting to quit and going back and forth. So I'm going to stay for 6 months and I'm going to learn how to forward shrimp. And if I still hate it at the end of 6 months, then I'm going to quit. Like that's the decision that I made. And so I kept going, and things got a little bit better. After 3 months, I started to feel like, okay, I've seen some of this before. It's not all brand new. And then you start to meet people, too. One other thing, when I first started, I did not like having people, in my physical space. Like, I always like to keep people, like an arm's distance away. Like, you sit over there, I sit over here. I grew up in a very reserved engineering family. Like, we're not super physically expressive. So I just, liked people having over there and, like, not over here. The guys at work used to tease me. They would, like, stand 12 inches away from me, like, look over my shoulder on my computer. And they're just trying to get a reaction because it's funny for them. But, yeah, like, it really bothered me having someone that close. And I was like, get out of here, so I was also dealing with that feeling a lot, but I almost forgot, it's been 4 years. I don't even remember having that much feeling uncomfortable just because of having someone else in your space.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm so shocked that you kept doing it because as I'm hearing this, someone is on top of you, sweating on your face, trying to strangle you, everything that you don't want, and you're frustrated as hell. You can't figure out this one basic motion. You're like, this is the worst thing ever. But a lot of the times in life, the things that we are not good at unlocks a massive amount of our potential if we stick with them, because that means there's tremendous growth to be had. Let's say you jump into something, whatever the hobby is, and you're just naturally a stud at it. You're just incredibly good. Well, then there's not a lot of lessons you're going to pull from that. Like you might get better at it, but you're not going to have those mental days where you're like, what is going on? Like, why can't I get this thing together? So when you do things that you suck at and you have to grow, what you don't realize is you're unlocking so many other doors, because if you go through this tremendous growth through this new avenue, how many other things are you now going to be capable of doing that you weren't able to do before? Whereas I feel like, especially in the younger generation, when people are not good at things right away, they just stop. They don't want to do them. They want the instant gratification about oh, I'm great at this and that's why I'm better. But that's not where the tremendous growth lies. The tremendous growth lies in sucking at something and then developing skills over time. And even if those skills are just resiliency, perseverance, the fact of committing to something that you made a commitment to. You said, I'm going to do this for 6 months. I'm sure quite a few days in there you were like, why am I doing this? But then you stuck with it. How did that change over time?
Yeah, so I think that when I was 18, I would have quit. I don't think I would have made it in jiu-jitsu, but I had done CrossFit, I had done ballroom dancing. I had already, sort of gone through the process of, okay, I'm not good at this movement right now, but if I keep practicing, I'll get better. I knew that in my head. It's going to get better. But it was just, yeah, showing up, trying to figure things out. I actually used to write notes in a notebook, which are funny to look back on now because, like, someone was teaching half guard at one point, and so I'm, like, writing out all the steps. This is how you get into half guard. Like, this is where you put your foot. This is how you move your hand. And then the next day, a different coach was teaching lockdown, and so I didn't know it was lockdown. I thought it was a different type of half guard. So I was like, okay, this is the first half guard I learned. This is Mike Burley's half guard, and like they're doing different things, and I don't know why it's different, but I'm trying the best I can to like with my analytical mind like break down each step. Like this is what you do next.
That's awesome. So then you end up staying with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so it starts to get interesting. So that's what I'm saying. Like it starts to get interesting, and like I'm actually invested in learning the techniques, and I like it now because I'm not getting hurt all the time, and like things are getting better. So that's probably why I stick with jiu-jitsu.
So now we're at like the 2019, about to hit the pause button on the entire world, 2020. Were there any other major events or things that took place that you'd want to talk to before 2020? And then without going into any of the ideologies or beliefs in 2020 or whether you were for or against what went on, what was that year like for you? Because as someone that was running nonstop and your brain didn't want you to slow down and you don't dare sit and look at any darkness, 2020 was a complete pause for everybody. What was that like for you?
So there's just one thing that seemed pretty irrelevant at the time, but in 2019, the fall of 2019, my mom retired, and she bought a piece of property, and she decided that as her retirement project, she was going to turn it into a farm. So she actually went to a class that the University of Michigan State for the whole year of 2019. She was going out there one day a week and visiting different farms, learning about organic farming, and this was something that she had decided to do as a retirement project. So that happened in the fall of 2019.
I have to throw something funny into this story. You had the passion when you were a little kid, or you said at one point you had an idea of being a farmer. Your mom said, no, go be an engineer. And now your mom in 2019 goes, you know what I'd like to do if I could do anything? Organic farming. Your daughter wanted to do that. It's funny how life comes around, and like, plus as we're older, with age comes wisdom and things like this. But it's like that was the first thing that she went into, and your heart had a place for that when you were a young kid. And what you're doing now that we're gonna get to is farming. So it's like it was almost laid in front of you the entire time in your story. And it just, the right door hadn't opened up to get you
Yeah,
there.
but at this point, I'm an engineer. Like, I've been doing this for work for a long time. So I'm like, oh, yeah, my mom's doing this farming thing. That's cool. I mean, I guess I'll go help once in a while. And I actually tried to discourage her from taking on too much because I'm like, I'm working full time. I don't have time to help. This is before 2020. Like, I have a whole job. I have a social life. I have all this stuff. I'm like, I'm not going to spend all of my time on the farm. Like, I have things to do because back when I was in college, I did actually drag my mom down to a farm in Georgia. We went to visit a farm because I'd been like reading this blog, and this is the kind of farming I want to do. So I'm like, come see this. Like, I was going to go by myself, and my mom is like, you're 19 years old. You're not going to the middle of rural Georgia by yourself. You cannot do this. And I'm like, oh, you can come with me. That's fine. So we went down together, and we stayed there for the weekend. It was kind of like a workshop type thing. So I had experience, and then I had also stayed on a different farm in Michigan and just like stayed for a week and helped out like figuring out what they do. And that was kind of the thing that was like, okay, I'm okay with engineering because farming is really hard work, and I don't really have any ability to do this right now. So then I just went into engineering. So by the time that my mom decided to buy a farm, I was kind of like, this is going to be a lot of work. I'm not sure you want to do this. But, she was very driven, and she's like, I'm retiring and I need something to do. She's absolutely not the type to just sit around at home and do nothing. So that's what happened.
So then we get to 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the most wild event in all of our lives that we're going to remember until the day we die. What was 2020 like for you?
So March of 2020.
And were you here before the pandemic or no? Yeah, I was
No,
gonna say you
I'm
came
still
after.
training at Kaizen at this
Okay.
point. So March of 2020, I'm training Jiu-Jitsu at Kaizen. I'm still working my regular job, and the rumors start going around, and then in the next couple of weeks, like there's lockdowns, and that's the story. Um, I actually was back to work within the first 2 weeks of lockdowns. Because I work in a laboratory, you can't really do it from home. So they split up the team and they're like, okay, we're going to have these people come in, like the minimum staffing requirements, but we need people in here to keep things running.
I mean, you work for the federal government at this
Yes.
time.
Yeah, so I work for the federal government. We were deemed essential to keep the military-industrial complex running. You can't shut this down, so.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
There was nobody on the freeway. Like, I would be driving to work, there was like one car, maybe a truck. Like, it was seriously like the whole world had ended and nobody else was left alive.
You were in the apocalypse. It's 28 days later. You're waiting to see zombies pop up. You know what I mean? You're on your way to a lab because you're essential, because we don't have enough weaponry. We're not like good to just chill on technological advancements for a little period for the health of the people. Your life didn't matter very much.
You have to risk your life in order to keep these things going. It's very important.
That's exactly what I'm hearing in this story. Like, while they're trying to tell everyone, like, everyone's going to get wiped out. Like, you know what I mean? But Dawn, make sure you're in the lab, okay? We're going to minimum staff. You're collateral damage. Get in there, girl.
Yeah, so my sister is working from home, and I'm going into work. It's kind of a hybrid schedule, so I'm going in some days, not going in other days, and but besides that, like, everything is completely locked down. There's nowhere to go. Even if you wanted to go out of the house, you can't. And so what we're doing is, it's March 2020, and then it's April 2020. I would say April 2020 is when the most of the lockdown happened. And we're putting up an 8-foot deer fence at the farm. So my mom and my dad and my brother-in-law, a cousin, some other people, really close friends, we all go outside and we have this deer fence and we're putting it up because you can't grow anything in Farmington Hills without a deer fence. The deer will eat it all.
That's actually perfect timing for your story. How in the world would you have had the time that you had to invest to do this? You wouldn't have been able to. But the whole world shut down and you were like, opportunity, let's get this done.
The whole world shut down and we had nothing to do, so we were on the farm putting things together. My dad built a hoop house from scratch. That's like a metal structure that's covered with plastic. It's an unheated greenhouse, basically, and I'm building a chicken coop at this point. I had built a chicken coop at my house, just behind the garage, so I had a little bit of experience, and I'm like, okay, I'll build one for my mom at the farm, and that's what's going on.
So you were incredibly productive, when I know most of my friends were sitting around either depressed or like smashing food and celebrating the fact that they didn't have to go into work. Or you were incredibly productive. You're out there building a farm from the ground up.
Well, it happened at the right time. I mean, April is when the weather starts to get nicer, so we're outside. I have my own gardens at home. Like, I don't have a ton of time that's not going to good use because I'm either working at the farm or working at the lab or in my own yard doing stuff there. So, yeah, I'm super busy and productive during this time.
So 2020 goes on. When you do all this work on the farm and you're spending some time there with the family, I'm sure the idea is starting to get into your head, even if it doesn't get all the way to your conscious brain about like, maybe I could do farming, or maybe that didn't even cross your brain that it could be a financial avenue for you. You might have been thinking, well, I have to be an engineer, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing here. When does the transition happen? Because as of today, you're not an engineer anymore. You're a farmer.
No.
How does that happen?
It's not happening yet, for sure. I'm still working my job, and you understand there's not a farm right now. There's a large piece of property that is grass, and we just put up this fence. We have a hoop house starting to go up. There's a chicken coop, but we don't have anything there. It doesn't look like a farm. It's not working like a farm. It's just very, very early in the process. And I'm actually sitting at work in May 2020, and I really miss people right now. Even though I have my family, I'm living with my sister, I just don't have a community. So when everything shut down, the churches shut down too. And that was something that I had been doing a lot of church activities. That was basically a community. And then my gym obviously had shut down. And so I was like, there are no people in my life besides, my immediate family. And so I was searching, was basically just doing an internet search. I ran across a news article of there was a gym opening in some other state. It wasn't even this gym. And then I was like, well, maybe they're doing that in Michigan. So I go searching for a gym. Are there any gyms open in Michigan? And that's actually when I found this place, because you were in the news and your gym was open. And I'm like, well, they actually do jiu-jitsu. And, I was like just looking for anything that was open where people could talk to each other because that
Hi,
wasn't a
I
part.
need to do something or I'm going crazy.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I always thought that I was an introvert until lockdowns happened. And then I was like, no, I actually really need people in my life. Like, this is not a good thing. Because at a certain point, like at the worst of the lockdowns, like I felt like, why am I even waking up in the morning? Like, there's nothing going on in life. Like, even though I had things to do, I was still working. Like, some people weren't even working. I was still working. I had the gardens. I had the farm. We my friends, we basically went to parks and did workouts. Like, I have a very active lifestyle, but it still just feels like you've been completely abandoned by everybody at this point.
There was a lot of people in that boat because, I mean, I got both sides. I got people that would call up here, were screaming at the top of their lungs on the phone because they were so angry that I opened back up. And I would like just try to talk to them as people like, hey, like I can explain this to you. I can answer any questions you have. You don't have to come in here. You don't have to support what we're doing. But like there's a lot of people that need to take care of their physical and mental health. Like suicide rates are spiking. No matter what the news is telling you, it's good to take care of yourself. It's good to be in a part of a community. It's good to be healthy. You want a good immune system, you should probably work out and do the things that are conducive of a good immune system. And then I got the people that were like so thankful. Like there was people calling in and be like, listen, like you don't know how much it means to me that I can actually just get out and like be a part of a community again and be around people. Like I feel like my life is crumbling to pieces. So it was a wild event. And that I had never asked you how you found us. And so basically you saw this terrible tyrant in the news being like, look at this guy opened his gym against the executive orders. And then you came in.
I actually sent you a message, and you had called me, and we had talked about it, and I was kind of like, I have trained jiu-jitsu before. I have a gym. We still thought, like, the world was going to get back to normal at that point, so I'm like, I'm going to go back to train at my gym, Kaizen, but they're not open right now, so I just want to come train at your gym for a month or, until they open things back up, and
I do remember that. And I was like, yeah, sure, just come on in, put in work.
yeah, so I showed up here my first day, and you decided to pair me up with Alicia Zapatella after I had just taken 2.5 months off of jiu-jitsu. And that went predictably not in my direction. But I was like, well, I'm doing jiu-jitsu again. It's a gym. And I don't know where they found all these women because Bobby was still here at that time. So I think I worked with her like in one of the drills. And I'm like, why is everybody here so good? Like this is a lot different from my gym that I was a part of.
And we do have a massive female presence. Like I've been to gyms all over the place. We have like 30 girls that train here between kickboxing and boxing and jiu-jitsu and kids class. Like we have like an army of kids. I mean, even if you take the kids out of the equation, there's like 25 women that train here. And I think that really shocks people at first because you probably came from a gym where was there more than 5? Actually, Kaizen had a pretty good culture, so they probably did have women. But was it just a different level of women or a different level of athlete? What are the big differences that you noticed?
We definitely had women training there. There was a couple purple belts, but they didn't. Though the purple belt women didn't always train the evening classes. So by the time I had been there 2 years, I was probably the most consistent blue belt going there. So all of the other women, they were newer. Some of them were good athletes, but they just didn't know as much about jiu-jitsu at that point.
Got it. So you transition over to SFS. At what point does the farm get to the level where you go, I'm going to leave being an engineer and become a farmer? Because that is a massive jump. And I remember when you came out here and you told me this, I was like, what? That is so awesome. And that's why we decided to podcast about this. How do you build to that point?
So I want to bring up one thing first. Do you remember when you painted the ceiling black here at the gym?
Yeah, me and Master Press.
Yeah. So there was one day that I had come out. You guys started like super early in the morning, and you were painting. Like I strolled in at 10:30 in the morning or something. And
I actually want to say something to this really quick. We put out a post asking anybody from the team to come help us because it was like a massive project. This building is huge, and Juan and I were going to paint it ourselves. So we were like, if anyone is willing to come in and just like help us do a little bit of basic work, like Juan's going to be painting, I'm going to be moving the stuff around, but like a little bit of help would be awesome. None of the fighters came in. None of like the longtime members came in, but you were the first person in the door. I remember that, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is a woman that is new to the team. She's an engineer. She's got a million things that she could be doing, but she's in here helping us. I remember being really moved by that and like not fully understanding, like, why is Dawn here helping? I remember that. So you can continue, but that was my perception. Like, Josh Parisian ain't here. Alicia ain't here. My top people aren't here, but Dawn is here helping me in Master Perez.
So, something that was really impactful. So we stayed until about 8 o'clock that night. We were just painting everything and getting it all done, and going home and like thinking about that experience. I was like, I have never spent this much time and effort like working on my own dreams. Like, I had dreams. I worked on them. I was like, I've never woken up in the morning. You guys got here super early. You were working this hard. I'm like, I've never ever once spent like an entire day working on the things that I say I'm most passionate about. Like I work hard. Like we worked in the ballistics lab. We spent a lot of time like working like physical labor, lifting things, moving things. Like it's not like I do CrossFit. It's not I do Jiu-Jitsu. I don't not work hard. I just never put this much time and effort into something that I'm really passionate about. So I think that actually had a huge impact on my life, because that was the holidays just before 2021.
Correct. It was Christmas to New Year's is when we were here doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was one of those days.
we could have taken all that time off because we usually close the gym for that week sometimes and just let everybody spend time with their family and their loved ones. And like me and Juan were just in here grinding. Yeah, I remember.
So that actually inspired me, and that year, 2021, I started growing more things. Like, usually, typically in my garden, I would do like one or two new plants. This time I was like, let's do 25 new plants, like just increase the effort level. I was building new, because we start all of our plants from seed, so I was building new structures indoors, like plant lights and all that to get the seed started. So like in like January 2021, I was starting all these plants from seed and like just learning a bunch of things that I had never really done before. Even though I would have told you that I was passionate about farming, I loved gardening, it was something that was very important to me, I just hadn't put that much time and effort into it, like ever.
What you just said was really impactful. That I think it's a question that imagine if every human being on this earth asked themselves, when is the last time that I dedicated this much time and effort to my own dreams? You know what I mean? Even if it's just a full day. How weird is it to say that you couldn't recall, if ever, the last time that you had dedicated an entire day to your dreams? That is a revolutionary thought. That is a thought that when you think about that over and over, that will change the entire trajectory of your life, because you're next going to ask yourself, why? Why have I not poured this much energy into what I want? If I'm pouring energy into the job that I work for to get numbers done and be a good employee, and I'm pouring energy into these other things, why am I not pouring into myself? Did you ask that question of why, and did you have an answer?
That was basically the question that I was asking myself the whole time. I was like, why have I never done this? And like that was the steps that I started to take after asking that question. I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing more things. Like I could have done this all along, except I just didn't, because you get busy. You're working a job. You're tired when you get home. You're doing different things. I do jiu-jitsu. I do all these other things, and then it was winter time, so it was still kind of locked down. There wasn't a ton of other options, so I just started doing that a lot. And that was the whole spring and summer of 2021. I'm basically just learning more, because we're still working the hybrid schedule at work. I'm doing like some days in the lab, some days at home. There's not a lot you can do from home as a ballistics engineer. I answer emails. And then my mom needed help with the farm, so I would spend my free time there, basically just helping things go well. So that was something that I was investing more time into, but it was still just an idea in my head. Like, well, it wasn't even an idea in my head. It was just like, this is the thing my mom does. This is what I do, and I help my mom when I can. And then in September of 2021, I was up in Grayling, Michigan, actually working with the team. We were doing some field testing out at the Army base there. And the President of the United States signed an executive order mandating all federal employees get the COVID vaccination. And I'm like checking my phone in the morning, making sure the world hadn't ended overnight. And I see this news pop, and I'm like, no, that's impossible. Like there's no way that's an actual thing. Like they wouldn't do that. This must be an April Fool's joke or something. Completely impossible. And then people keep talking about it all throughout September. Like it doesn't go away. Like they keep defining it, and I'm like, this is a thing that might actually happen. Like leave out the politics and everything. Basically, there's no way my employer is going to make my medical decisions for me. Like that's just a non-starter, and like I'm not following this executive order. And so like the other option is to get fired from your job, which is completely something I had never considered in my whole life. Like people work their entire careers at the federal government. Like 35 years is incredibly common. You hear 40 years. There was somebody working there that was 75 years old. Like they don't fire you unless if you do something really, really bad. I had never in my life conceived that, I might get fired from my job. So I spend at least 3 weeks or a month like just getting over the shock of like this could actually happen.
So denial turns into your illusions get shattered, and you go, holy shit, they can do this. And if they're on a political rampage for power, money, whatever it is, shaming you, whatever it is, coercion, they might do this.
Because they weren't giving up. They kept talking about my team leader. I had the best team leader in the whole world. He came and talked to me like they're kind of serious about this. Like, you're going to have to make a decision. I'm like, you might have to start looking for a new ballistics engineer. Like there was never any question in my mind that I would actually follow the order. It was just, are they actually going to fire people over this or not?
So where does that strength of character come from? Why in the world did you, Dawn, you could have just gone and got this stupid little thing, and you could have kept your job, and you could have stayed complacent, and you would have been a good little, citizen in their eyes. Why the rebellion? Miss, I don't rebel.
I mean, you just listened to my whole story. I was raised very far outside of what you'd call like the norm, and I had never been vaccinated for anything in my entire life, and I definitely wasn't going to start with this one. It was.
So it was just a non-negotiable to you. You're like, listen, I don't care if the president shows up here. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, and at this point, I've already gone through the whole CrossFit thing. Jiu-Jitsu, it really builds confidence. I mean, at this point, I probably am getting to the rebellious teenage stage. I'm like, I don't care if you are the president of the United States. You can't tell me what to do. And even if I do get fired, so now I'm going home and I'm like facing the real, like, what does my life look like if I get fired from my job that I have been working for my whole life? Well, my whole adult life.
That is wild to sit there and consider, because that's like people's biggest fear. Most people's biggest fear is like a loss of identity, loss of income. You're going to be a failure in the eyes of society. You're going to be ridiculed. You're not going to be able to provide for yourself. You're going to be just a loser. Like, that's people's fear. That's why they put up with jobs they hate. That's why they continue to do things their entire lives that don't inspire them, because like they have a massive fear of the unknown. Like, well, what will I do? What will happen? You are now staring this in the face in a way that you didn't even think was possible. You never would have thought in a million years. If we would have went back to 2015 and we could have told the story of 2020, you'd have been like, that's a great sci-fi movie, James. But that will never happen in the United States of America, where we say we believe in freedom more than anywhere else. And where we've taught people that they can take a stance on what they believe in. And it's supposed to be admirable. You were shamed, guilted, all kind of stuff if you took a stance. I know. You know what I mean? I was on the national news for taking a stance in what I believed in.
Oh, yeah. We had, like, the 3-star general talking to us about how we should really follow this order and it's a good idea. And, like, I'm like, I don't agree. It just was something that I wasn't going to do. And then, I was left with the decision, well, like, I'm, like, going to walk out of my job. But like I said, my team leader is the best team leader in the whole world. He basically talked me off the ledge, and he's like, okay, just go through the process. There's a deadline in November. Like, they might postpone it, like, don't quit your job yet. So in October of 2021, I had been talking to a friend, and I actually started working a part-time job. I started doing math tutoring. He was doing math tutoring. It's like, just kids after school. And so, like, this was my second job that I ever gotten hired for. So I was like, I'll just do this math tutoring thing. I'm still working my engineering job, and I go on a little bit like that. and then it's November, and I think they pushed back the deadline to January or something, like they're going through the holidays.
I always thought they would never actually uphold them. It was just most people fall in line, Dawn. Most people are sheep. Most people in the face of fear or pressure or like the spotlight is going to come on you, they just cripple. And then what it is they just know you'll fold before they fold. And then last minute, they bump the deadline back. And then they're like, oh, this time it's not going to get backed up. And what happens? More people get it. So they're just getting maximum voluntary compliance that they can without actually having to enforce it. Because let's say they enforce it and they fire you from your federal position, and now 5 years later, 10 years later, this is overturned or whatever it is, or it's deemed to be like one of the worst events that politically has been, infiltrated on the people. You might get a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. You might be the person that is gonna say, I was fired for this and it is, against my rights. They don't want to open up that type of liability. Did you make them fire you, or did you step down voluntarily?
Yeah, well, we're still not there yet. So remember, my identity was still like, I'm an engineer. I should have an engineering job. So I had actually talked to you about this, and like you helped me get my resume out to different people, and like I was talking to other engineering companies, and they would always get hung up on this thing like, so why are you looking for a new job? And I would tell them, because this thing with the federal government, and they're like, at that point they were pushing it for everybody. It's hard to remember now because it's like completely not in the conversation.
I remember it very vividly. I actually have a full journal that's like this where I recorded almost everything that was taking place, because I was like, one day they're going to try to distort the event that actually took place. It is going to be presented in a different light. Oh, no, it wasn't really like that. Yeah, it was. And I clearly remember it. You know what I mean? So I was very aware of the things, and I vividly remember them.
Yeah, so they were pushing this for everybody. So like no other engineering company wanted to hire an engineer that was going to then be a problem for them if this did go through. So I was like, well, it seems like I can't get another engineering job. So I actually I started working another part-time job. Someone from my mom's church needed help with at-home care for an elderly couple, so I started doing that on Saturdays. So now I'm like working my engineering job during the week, and doing math tutoring after school for kids, and I'm working on Saturdays. And
I can't believe I ever saw you on the mats.
yeah, I can't believe it either. It was very challenging, but we were going into the holidays then, right? So things were not very intense at any of the jobs. And then at some point in December, I don't remember, but I talked to my mom, and she had sort of seen me, like getting these new part-time jobs. And like, obviously I had told her about what's going on at work. And she was like, well, I could hire you to work part-time at the farm. So she actually brought up the idea. Like, it still wasn't an idea in my head that, I'm going to work on the farm, until she brought it up. She was like, I was going to hire someone, because she had been putting so much time and effort into the farm, and there are a lot of things that physically she just can't do, because we do everything by hand. It's a lot of heavy lifting sometimes. And so she's like, well, I was going to hire someone anyway. I could just hire you to work on the farm. And I'm like, oh, like this is when it starts to, so it's December of 2021. I've got a couple part-time jobs plus my regular job that I still don't know if I'm quitting or if I'm being forced out, or if things are starting to take shape in my mind. Like, maybe there is another way to do this instead of like, be this engineer that I spent my whole life working towards. Like, the position that I had, I was happy at work. After, the whole story of going through engineering school and really not liking my job for a long time, I was like, well, I finally have a good position here, and now I'm just going to like quit and go do something else. So
They literally put you out on the plank, and they were like, see ya. You know what I mean? For a good engineer that's a good person, that does the right thing, that's a good citizen society, and yet they just hung you out to dry.
I mean, it wasn't just me. It was this whole, small group of people at the Detroit Arsenal. Like, we had, our own support group online, and it was like, yeah, all of us are going through this. And it's not everybody, but it's more than just me who's basically facing this.
So do they fire you, or did you give those cowards a way out and walked away?
So they did not fire me. Sorry to disappoint you.
Dawn, you're supposed to make them bring their hand. The threat of them putting their hand down is why people crumble. What you do is you say, bring the hand down then. Put the foot down then. Do it. You know what I mean? Because that's how we actually push back. If we voluntarily crumble, You left on your own accord. You know what I mean? There's not as much rebuttal. There's not as much that you can do in return. Like when they told me here, I got called by the health department. I contacted by all these people. We're going to show up and we're going to shut you down. And I was like, all right, what day? And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, I'll be there. I'll sit out front. I'll record the entire interaction. And if I can't do what I know this is my calling to do, then I'm going to champion this cause in my life. So you're going to have me 100% campaigning against this.
Yeah, but you haven't listened to the rest of the story yet.
Okay. So there is Dawn did jab back a little bit. I'm excited. Continue.
Okay, so as far as I know, they have not fired anyone about this, even though the deadline was in November. And
See?
then it was,
Because they're cowards and they want you to just back down. They don't actually enforce it. These executive orders, what did we get 100 of them? I just stopped listening. It's like when my grandma told me, like, you shouldn't leave your job, Jimmy. You should, you don't know anything about business. You should just stay where you're at. I was like, okay, thanks for your recommendation on what I should or shouldn't do. I'm not going to take it as an autonomous being that is capable of critical thinking in my own life choices. You know what I mean? So, sorry, I'm getting on a little bit of a rant, but I don't like the way that they bully people. The administrations or people in positions of power bully others because they crumble before, the threat of what could happen.
because they can. They think you don't have any other options. They think that you are going to comply just to keep your job because that's what most people are going to do. And so what the executive order did was it forced me to take a look at my life and be like, what happens if I don't have this job? And so, like I said, I was working the part-time jobs, and then I'm very analytical, into math. I like numbers. So I've been recording my expenses since 2014. Basically, whenever I spend money, I write it down month by month. I just have this record. And so I start looking at my budget, and I'm like, okay, what numbers do I need to change here in order to make a different lifestyle work? Because I had never really been concerned about it as an engineer. And so between the part-time jobs I was working and my mom saying, I can hire you to work part-time on the farm, I was like, I can make it without my engineering job, which was a completely different thought than I had ever had before. Because, everyone in my life was engineers, like this is what you did. And I actually want to attribute that to a lot of your fighters here. I had, in the summer of 2021, you had the ladies come in for the women's
Female
camp.
mega camp.
Yeah, for the female mega camp. I had driven some of them to the airport, and I got to hear their stories, basically like what they do for work, and like they're just completely pursuing their passion. They're doing whatever they need to in order to make it work financially, and they're like, these are women that are around my age, right? Like they're in their 20s or maybe 30. They're not that much different from me. They've decided that they want to be a cage fighter, and that's what they're going to do. And I had always thought that farming was a really non-practical career. And I love all your fighters, but MMA is not exactly a practical career. So I was like, well, if these people can make it work, they're following their dream, they're going for their passion in life, and they're doing this thing that's like even less practical than farming, like I can make it work. So at this point, it's January of 2021, and I signed paperwork that says I'm leaving at the end of March. Because the government always takes 5 times as long as anything needs to happen. So I signed paperwork in January, and my end date is in March.
Paperwork that was saying you're leaving up on your own accord and you're voluntarily resigning.
Voluntary separation. So the idea is like if you got laid off at work, you would get severance pay. This is kind of like a voluntary layoff where like you just get severance pay for leaving.
What would have happened if you just said, no, I'm not leaving. You have to fire me.
I would still have my engineering job, and I would still be working there, and I would not be farming.
So they didn't enforce it, though. That's the point that I wanted to make sure we got clear on the podcast. Cowards. They didn't enforce it is the point. They just wanted people to crumble to the fear of it. They didn't actually want to go through the next step, right?
They did not enforce it, no.
Okay.
They just said they were going to.
Which is exactly what I would have told people, and they would have been like, no, you're wrong, James. They're going... But anyway, you wouldn't be where you are right now, and you're in a better place, right? You're doing something that you actually care about, and and this is much better for you. You actually just touched on one of the most powerful speeches I've ever heard in my entire life was Jim Carrey. And he talks about that his father could have been an incredible comedian. He thought that his father just had the gift, but he didn't really believe that that was possible for him. So he took the safe route and he became an accountant. And by being an accountant, he was like, well, I'll be able to provide for my family. Like, I'll be able to just pay the bills. Like, it's the safe route. And then at one point, he ended up being let go from his accounting job. And then the family struggled really bad. He had to do everything he could to get by. So Jim Carrey's famous words from the speech were, you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love. Because he's like, my father did the by the book safe route. You did the by the book safe route. I'm going to be an engineer. And something so beyond your control and circumstance was like, sorry, because of this, you no longer have employment, or we're threatening it. And you had to be let go from like, I did this because this is the safe, intelligent route. But now it puts you back on track to something that you actually enjoy.
Yeah, and I mean, it might be even worse just to threaten, like, leaving the job, because then you have to make the decision, like, am I actually leaving? Are they actually going to fire me? Like, there's so much indecision, and there was a lot of fear and, like, not knowing what's going to happen next, and I didn't know what my life was going to look like. Like, I had never done anything like this before. The farm is, I mean, this is the third year of the farm, so we don't even have that spun up yet, and
When I break it down in my mind, though, and I think about, like, okay, you're asking me to voluntarily resign, so I get no benefits or no help or anything like that. And the alternative is you have to actually enforce a policy that very well may crumble and fail and not hold up in the Supreme Court or any of these things, and I will lose my employment as well. It's the same thing. You want me to quit. I lose my employment and I have no repercussions because you can say you chose to. Or worst case scenario, they go, told you we were firing you, and they fire you. Why is there fear? It's the same thing.
there's fear because there's fear of the unknown. There's fear of, like, so my engineering brain, like, in school we get training on, like, design failure effects and modes. So, like, basically your brain is trained to think of everything that could go wrong when you're basically coming up, because engineers design new products, right? So my brain is, like, designed to think of every negative possibility that could happen.
I get that 1,000%, but the worst case thing in that situation is you will be fired. If you quit your job, they are the same.
Theoretically, yes. It feels different when it's something outside of your control or something that you're choosing to do.
Oh, like you got to take the power. Like, I'm choosing to walk away instead of, no way.
It feels a lot different emotionally.
Imagine if I'm a tyrant, I'm this messed up, corrupt human being, and I put you at the edge of a cliff, and I say, you better jump off this cliff or I'm going to push you off it. What? It's the same thing. I'd be like, well, you're going to have to try to push off me then, because I'm not jumping off the cliff myself. And you know what? I'm pretty good at jiu-jitsu, so I'm going to probably throw you off the cliff. But it's the same thing. Now, I can understand how your emotions get tied into it. Like, there's these threats on how it's being presented, and it was a very, like you were the problem. You were the outcast. Why won't you just fall in line? But to me, when I look at it from a separated standpoint, and maybe that's the reason I had no fear here. If I just shut down and I obey to the overlords just because, or they had to come and shut me down, it's the same thing. I'm just refusing to crumble on my belief system. I would be like, I refuse to walk away from this thing because I believe that I should have the right to my body. I have the right to make this choice. If you're going to get rid of me, you're going to have to force your hand. And then it will be clearly known by everyone that you did that. You know what I mean? I'm not just going to give you the freedom from actually having to exercise this thing that a lot of people think is complete bullshit.
So yeah, but see, the thing is, I had already envisioned my life at that point of what it could look like if I don't have this job, and now I don't want to keep working as an engineer
I get
anymore.
it. So you kind of wanted out. But let's say that vision never took place. You would have made them force their hand.
Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely know of people that did not get vaccinated. They were not fired. They're still working there. It's not a problem. They just completely dropped the conversation.
It's because it was just the push during the time. One last time. Cowards. So anyway, let's talk about the beautiful part of your story that you just opened up. You're opening a brand new chapter. You are a full-time farmer, Dawn. Tell me about that. What is it like getting up in the morning now? What are the differences? Like, what's the energy that you feel in your life? There are some more unknowns, and there's some more like you're out on the ship at sea now. You got to make it work. But how has that changed your life?
So A lot of things have changed, and it's been a really gradual process actually, starting back in October or January, whenever you want to start it. But basically, when I made the decision, so in January 2020 was that when I signed the paperwork, and I knew I was getting out, but I still kind of had that 3 months to go through. The weather is still obviously really bad. There's not a lot going on at the farm, and I start slowly building up. So I have different part-time jobs. So my schedule is completely, out of whack from normal. Um, by the time I knew I was leaving my job in January, like I was kind of like on the back burner at work. I was just helping transition. They did find some new people to come in, so I was helping transition my work, and I had a lot of unused sick leave, so I was just using that up as the days went by. And like I had an end date, like this is when I'm leaving, and so my whole team kind of understood. And my team leader actually did take some time and be like, "Hey, you could cancel the paperwork if you want to. Like you could keep working here." And I'm like, now it's like February of 2021, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna do this farming thing. No matter what happens, whether it turns out well or not. Like this is the decision I've made because, again, it was kind of like the decision to stick with jujitsu. I was like, there was a lot of indecision back in December and January. Like, I didn't know what my life was going to look like, but I was like, I'm going to make this decision and I'm going to stick with it and I'm not changing my mind. So once I had made that resolution, I'm like, okay, so now what does my life look like? And a ton of different things have happened, like completely unexpected, but the farm is amazing. We have so many things that are going well this year as opposed to like last year or the year before. Like it felt like we were just barely getting started. We're growing organic produce. We have chickens. We have people come visit the farm now, which is amazing. Some of the people from this gym actually, Layla, Amelia, Apollo, and Quinn, they've been out to the farm with their parents, and some of my friends. They've come to visit and they come help work. They come help do the gardening. Like I said, we do everything by hand, so we're growing this food and like we can just bring people on with us and be like, hey, help out with this task. It doesn't take a lot of instruction. A lot of farming, modern farming, there's like tractors, like you get lost in the noise. You can't just have kids running around. You can't have people there. But this is like my mom and I were working together to make this farm work, and it's going really well. We are producing food, and right now we're selling it to direct to consumers, and we're going to see what direction it goes from here.
This is awesome. And it's made your life an adventure again. You're not in a monotonous thing that whether you maybe want to be engaged to the project you're working on or not, you are literally the captain of your ship alongside the mom. Like you're on a new adventure. There are no limitations to where you can go with this. Who knows what you're going to turn it into? That kind of makes the story fun again. You know what I mean? It's like when you wake up in the morning, yeah, there's challenge, but there's opportunity. There's lessons to be learned. It's just great times to be had. So I guess the last thing that I want to cover before we wrap the podcast up is you help coach here. You work with the kids. You give your jiu-jitsu to them. You spend a lot of time with the new females that come into the building. We're talking about the idea of starting a women's only jiu-jitsu program because there's a lot of women out there that the prospect of going into a mixed martial arts gym where there's all these fighters and big men and trying to start this whole new art, it's just a little bit too much. The barrier to entry is a little bit too great. But if they could come into an environment where they could train with a phenomenal community of women that are helping each other out, that are growing, that are doing physical activity, taking care of their minds, challenging themselves to grow, that could be a tremendous opportunity. So just speak on a little bit, why do you coach? Like, why do you give your time to help out the kids? And then if you were going to speak to a woman that was considering doing jiu-jitsu for the first time, what would you tell them? Why should they do that?
Yeah, so I started helping with the kids class back when one of the times when you were traveling and they just asked for any adult volunteers. I think that maybe because I don't have children of my own or anything, I've always been interested in like keeping kids in my life, and I had always helped my mom do different things. She taught catechism when we were growing up, so like basically helping out with kids classes is something that I'm very familiar with. And when I had the opportunity to do that here, it was part of something that I wanted to design into my life. Even as an engineer, I was still thinking, okay, what are the things that are important to me, like relationships with people. Like I'm making sure that I go to see my younger sister and her kids. They're out in Grand Blanc, so it's about an hour drive, but I want to make sure that I'm part of their life. I want to make sure that I'm keeping just things in my life that are important to me, and helping out with the kids class was my opportunity to do that. I was like thinking maybe I could like volunteer in Detroit or something with kids, but this was something that was right in my skill set and something that I wanted to put in my life. Like I want to help kids learn something.
And look at the 4 kids that came out to the farm.
I know it's
4
been
year jiu-jitsu students.
incredibly amazing. Like just the opportunities that I didn't even expect to happen. Like sometimes I'll just try doing something and the results will be totally unexpected. Like the one time I came out to help paint the ceiling, I didn't have any expectations of learning something, but like it changed my life. To some extent, it gave me a new optic to view what I was doing with my life, and like, okay, what am I passionate about? So yes, helping the kids class, that's something I really enjoy doing. For me, jujitsu it's built a lot of confidence. So I think it started back when I was doing CrossFit, and I was a girl who was totally unathletic. I couldn't do a pull-up, I couldn't do a push-up, just doing things that you thought were once impossible. Like if you had gone back in time and told the 18-year-old me, oh, you're going to be able to do pull-ups one day, I'm like, that's funny. I can't do that. Like that's completely impossible. And then so CrossFit built up enough confidence in me that I stuck with Jiu-Jitsu. I don't think I would have stuck with it without that. And then when I started doing Jiu-Jitsu, it was kind of like, this is something that I'm voluntarily doing. It's really difficult, and it makes the rest of life seem easier. Because when you are in situations that you feel like you're struggling, it's not as bad as someone sitting on your face, twisting your arm behind your back. You're like, I voluntarily choose to do this activity where people are trying to strangle me or break my arm, and it gives you more confidence to face the rest of life.
That is a perfect pitch for jiu-jitsu. If I tried to explain to a brand new student why they should stick with it, that's exactly what I would tell them. Because I tell all the new people, I go, listen, your first couple months, you're basically just going to get slaughtered over and over. You're going to get bullied, like not in a negative way, but you are going to feel helpless. You're going to feel stressed. You're going to feel overwhelmed. You're probably not going to understand a lot of these motions or even like theory behind what you're doing yet. But in a short period of time, you're going to make progress, and you're going to start to see that progress, and you're going to start to feel a little bit better about it. And it is a challenge worth pursuing, and you're doing something very difficult. So it's like enhancing you as a human being. And then, like you said, if you get used to someone trying to strangle you against your will every day, doing a job interview is not such a big deal. Having a difficult conversation becomes a little bit easier. All of these things get the volume turned down, and now you can be more of who you really are, because that's what confidence really does. It unlocks the ability for you to live in the way that you want to live. Most people, they know who they are. They know what they would like to be able to show to the world, but the lack of confidence breaks them down. So you see a fraction of that human being versus when you do extremely difficult things, or you go through sometimes pain or trauma or other events in life, you start to go like, you know what? I'm going to be me every day to the fullest of my capabilities, because that's what's going to yield the best life for me. And I'm going to pursue that dream.
It really does, like you said, even with difficult conversations. And obviously that was something that I wasn't good at earlier in my life. And just being able to stand up and be like, this is what I'm going to do. And just because you disagree with me doesn't mean that we're going to do it your way. So I think a lot of that confidence has come from jiu-jitsu.
Well, Dawn, I don't know if you realize this, but we've shot like a full-length feature film. We are just about at 2 hours. Effortless, amazing dialogue. There was so many good parts of this story, and I think there's so many things that when you go back even and reflect on this, you dropped amazing insight throughout it, and it's a blueprint. You just dropped a roadmap. You painted a story of a woman that reinvented herself, that had to think for the first time when an illusion was shattered. An illusion was shattered, and you had to go, what am I going to do with this or that? And you talked about trials and growth periods. Like, this was a tremendous podcast. And, if there's anything else you'd like to say to record in this moment in time, or this, quick little bit, we'll record it. If not, we'll wrap this thing up. And I want to just thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, for sure. There is one more thing I'd like to say, actually. You like motivational speakers a lot. There was something that a motivational speaker said that definitely had some impact on my life, maybe changed it a lot. The person is named Matthew Kelly. I was listening to Matthew Kelly speak in person, and at the event, he was talking about what we can do as individuals. So he's basically saying, look at all of the rich and famous people in the world, the ones who don't get burned out on drugs or alcohol. Like, what do they do once they make it to the top? You know, like they're rich and famous, they have all this stuff. They go out and they help other people. They spend their lives, if they're not like basically burning themselves out on fame, they spend their lives helping others. And then he said, you can do that right now. Like, you don't have to pursue getting rich. You don't have to pursue getting famous. You don't have to do any of these things. You can just go help other people in your life right now. And that's something that I feel is really important. It changed my life because even though I was raised completely different than a lot of people, I still sort of felt the pressure like, oh, you should try to be rich. You should try to be famous. You know, you should try to be successful in other people's view. And when I heard Matthew Kelly talk about that, it was like, no, I don't have to do that. I don't have to follow other people's definition of success. I can just help people where I'm at right now. And that's what I think I want to do most through farming. Like, I love the work I'm doing on the farm, but what I want to do is help other people learn how to do this for themselves. Like, it's had such a big impact on my life, and this isn't a gardening podcast, so we didn't go into a ton of it, but like, I want to help other people learn how to grow their own food. I want to bring people to the farm and help them, like, hey, you can do this. Like, maybe you don't have the skills right now, maybe you don't have the confidence right now, but you can learn how to do this for yourself, and it's so worth it. Like, it changed my whole life, and you can do just a little bit of this at home.
And the feeling that you can make a difference in a world that really needs it is incredibly powerful. I don't know if you watched my podcast episode with Nick Monesto, who is the chef who is actually opening, he bought Two Brothers Coffee down in Howell, and now he's opening an artesian pizza shop. And you and him just, the story that, or what you were just saying, your words, was basically verbatim exactly what he said. Is when I realized I could bring people together and I could make a difference, I could show my love for something and I could help them learn, like, no, you can learn how to do this, you can learn these processes, you can. I'm just gonna have to send it to you because it was like almost chilling as I was sitting here. I'm like, this is, because that's a man that just found his passion recently. Well, he's had it for a little while, but he's really going all in on it now, and his life is becoming very vibrant and very full, and like, and I'm witnessing the exact same transformation from you. And then your words match so similar that I was sitting here, I'm like, oh my God, like these, I need to introduce you to him because I believe that you two would really click and you're both pursuing the same type of passions.
That's what I feel like. This is like the first time in life that I've really been excited to tell my story, that I've been feeling like I'm actually living according to the purpose that, you know, I'm supposed to be living in. And yeah, it's been really exciting.
Think about that. If I would have just invited you on here as an engineer, you might have been like, I'm just an engineer. Like, I work in a ballistics lab. I do whatever assignment I'm given. I work for the federal government. And now you're like, no, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to make an impact. That is magic right there. If there's magic in the world, it's being able to create things from our mind, to change people's lives, to make things a little bit better, to stand up for belief systems. Like, that's where there's a little bit of magic left. So, Dawn, it was an absolute pleasure to sit down and really get to know you today and have this conversation, you know, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun.
All right, we'll wrap this up.